Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amidabits, Namo Amidabits, Namo Amidabits, Namandaps, Namandaps, Namandaps. Well, thank you again for joining me today. I'm recording this session before we conduct our actual Obon Odori / Eitaikyo service, which again is of course taking place entirely virtually this year. And so fingers crossed that it's going to go well and everything worked out perfectly. I assume that when you're watching this, you've already experienced that from the night previously. So, you can compare and contrast my words with how it actually went. But today I wanted to talk about Eitaikyo and specifically also what it has in common with Odori and the Obon Festival. You were probably asking yourself that exact question, like, what are we doing and why is this happening? Well, if you really think about it, these are totally different observations, right? They take place at very different times of the year, right? Obon is, of course, a summer observation. And, Arizona usually kicks off the Southern District Obon dances. And we try to get that done earlier because it gets too hot later in the summer. And everyone kind of bases it off of that. And of course, they usually take place about May or June in the sweltering heat of the summer. And Eitaikyo, as you know, usually takes place right around now, right? In the accurate time in the winter. And the former is filled with lanterns, it's filled with dancing, festivals, and the latter is more for quiet meditation. You can picture the lighting of incense, the chanting of the ministers and the Sangha. But that being said, when you really take the time to look closely at both of these services, both these practices, there's a similar spiritual understanding that's common to both of them. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. From a spiritual perspective, both of these observations carry with them very common sentiment, right? This practice of reflection, this practice specifically, it's a reflection on the lives of those who came before us. Eitaikyo is a memorial service for anyone who has played a role in the history of our Sangha, Arizona Buddhist Temple Sangha, and to the history of the temple as the whole. Obon is similar on the surface. It's a celebration of our loved ones who are no longer with us today, and an opportunity to reflect on how they have impacted us throughout the years individually, the lessons that they have taught us, and to lose ourselves in a kind of celebration of their lives. That's the whole process of dancing, right? You're so enthralled and joyful at having known these people that you just lose yourself in the moment of Odori dance, right? The big difference is that Eitaikyo is specifically about the temple, our temple, and our Sangha, whereas Obon is about everyone, Buddhist or not, doesn't matter. The distinction is easy to overlook, but it's an important one. When I try to reflect on the people who have been part of my life in the past, obviously, we're not just talking about temple members. You're not just talking about Buddhist people, right? The people that come to mind are of all different shapes, all different sizes, different faiths, right? Different backgrounds. And the lessons I've learned from them, they didn't come from my time with them at the Sangha, or they didn't come from, our time spent together at church. A lot of the people who have made the biggest impact on me are people that I've shared drinks with that are no longer with me today. They're coworkers or their friends who've come and gone, their lives ending too early or, different circumstances arising. And, whether it's the time you spend with them at a bowling alley or the time you spend with, close family friends that came to your Thanksgiving dinners and those sorts of things that don't share the same faith backgrounds as you, while they are totally different in those respects, it's not like you hold them any differently in terms of how important they were to you as human beings. They hold a space in your mind. They taught you lessons about your life. They were meaningful to you, right? And they impacted you in very different ways. They were not part of the Sangha, but their contributions to our lives are no lesser in any imaginable way than the people of our temple. And Obon is an opportunity to reflect on all of those individuals, as well as our temple members, but all of those individuals. And Eitaikyo is really specifically focused on the Sangha and the people that played a role in the building, the construction, the history of our temple, the Arizona Buddhist Temple. It's an opportunity to reflect on the families that supplied the flowers for our altar for generations. The work of the Nisei farmers that worked with Reverend Hosen Seki back in the 1930s to take the leap and to break ground on expansive farmland to create like a community center and a temple for people to practice like the teachings of the Buddha. So they could establish a place where their children could go learn the teachings and play together and build communities and families. It's a reflection on the hours of labor that go into things that we see every day that we are in temple, like the time that goes into making a taiko drum, the time it takes for people to learn how to play a taiko drum as part of a sangha. It's the leagues of Dharma school teachers that are putting their hours and time into teaching the teachings of the Buddha on Sundays, preparing the lessons on the weekdays. It's the men and women that spend their time preparing meals for potluck, the hours that they carve out of time that they donate to clean the hondo, to plant our garden, to cook meals for everybody. It's the volunteer hours that go into matsuri, the flower arrangement on Hana Matsuri. It's the stuff that's been going on for 80 years that has allowed our Sangha to grow and allowed the temple to exist and be what it is. Eitaikyo is remembering those people. The people that you picture when you go to temple, when you think about temple, and you can't even disconnect temple from their faces and their memories. We honor the memory of all people, but there's also nothing wrong with taking the time to honor these specific people as well, right? The people that allowed this temple to grow and be what it is and survive, even in very difficult times, whether it was internment or a pandemic. In the way that we still love our mother on Father's Day, and the way that we take the time to specifically honor our fathers, this is how I kind of think of Eitaikyo, right? If it's someone's birthday, we honor that person with a gift in our thoughts, but it doesn't mean that the life of everybody else is also not important at the same time. But we want to take the time to honor specific people. That's Eitaikyo. And, it all goes back to the history of our temple, right? And it goes back to this practice of recognizing that all of our stories are tied together. It's like a giant tomb of a story that's 80 years long in terms of its writing. It continues to grow. And all those things I just mentioned, they're chapters in the story that we continue to write. And this year, this online Obon Odori / Eitaikyo service that we're holding today / the actual virtual Odori that we held last night. This is a unique experience for all of us and for every member of the Sangha. I mean, we're literally doing something that is very out of the ordinary, right? Outside the boundaries of what you would expect from tradition. But the situation that we're living in kind of calls for something that's a little bit different. It calls for something that is unique, right? When we think back on the history of the Arizona Buddhist Temple and its Sangha many years from now, this will be one of those stories that we will talk about. This will be one of those moments, right? We'll talk about how our members were sent to the camps and how the temple was closed, but how it was open for them when they returned. And some of those families had to move back onto the grounds to restart their lives. We'll talk about the fire that tore down the temple, but we'll also talk about how we rebuilt it afterwards. We'll talk about how the temple was closed for 7 months during COVID because we didn't want to risk the infection of any of our Sangha members. But we'll also talk about the year how we did Eitaikyo and Obon Odori on the same day, and we danced virtually to the glow of our screens. And while we were not with each other physically, we were with each other spiritually in that moment. It's one of those moments. And it's all part of the same story that keeps on growing and getting longer and longer and longer. And Eitaikyo is the time when we think about all the people that made that story possible. Every life we encounter has an impact on us. And whether we take the time to reflect upon it or not, that impact is meaningful, beautiful, profound. And it's not always easy to understand at the moment, right? But over a long period of time, as we reflect on it, it becomes clear. And that's what today is all about. Just take the time to think, to reflect, and to be grateful for are having the opportunity to do this today. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amidabits, Namo Amidabits, Namo Amidabits, Namandaps, Namandaps, Namandaps.